It was around 10,000 years BC that man first settled in the Test Valley. Now I'm fishing here in the heart of a borough with over 100,000 inhabitants, just a few miles from towns like Rumsey and Andover, with their housing estates and factories making everything from carpets to computers. Yet, I can still come here with my rod and enjoy a scene which seems as old as England. Over 300 years ago, Isaac Walton could have been thinking of this very scene when he wrote in the Angler song, "Fresh rivers best my mind do please, whose sweet calm course I contemplate and seek in life to imitate." And that's a sentence which still holds true today in the late 1980s. After all, if the only thing in fishing was catching fish, we'd never do it.
The Test is probably the most famous trout river in the world. It rises just outside the borough boundary beyond Long Parish and winds its peaceful way through Worrell and Stockbridge and Houghton, across the river meadows where it continually splits and reforms, past Rumsey in the south and out of the valley into Southampton Water. It's a river that's cosseted and attended to in every detail throughout its length by men like Bernard Aldrich, who supervises his stretch as it passes through the Broadlands estate at Rumsey, once the residence of Queen Victoria's Prime Minister Lord Palmerston.
At Broadlands, we've been fishing here since about 1880, and in that time there have only been 5 keepers. My predecessor was here 52 years, I've been here 32. So it's a very long-term job, and eventually you tend to regard your stretch of water as being yours rather than being owned by somebody. We've got second-generation fishermen now, and some of the people have been fishing here 30, 40 years. They just love it. They come probably to get away from the rush and the hurly-burly world of business. They come away from a telephone, and they come to an area which has changed very little over years. It's like being transported back into time, really. You know, the river itself is timeless. And they sit by the riverbank, or they walk the riverbank. They see voles, they see kingfishers, they see the heron, they see all sorts of things, which you wouldn't normally see in the normal run of life. And for their day, they are on a patch of water that is theirs entirely. If they don't want to be disturbed, they are not disturbed, and they are totally alone and away from everything.
In the same local government reorganisation that wiped Rutland from the face of the map and gave us hitherto unknown counties such as Avon, the Test Valley Borough was created from the town councils of Andover and Rumsey and the rural district areas which surrounded them. The new borough covers an area of 245 square miles and has a population of over 100,000. The borough contains 57 parishes and some of the most beautiful countryside to be found in England. There are two principal towns, Rumsey and Andover. Rumsey has a population of 15,000, while Andover is twice that size. Rumsey shares the administration of the borough with Andover, and council meetings are alternated between the two towns. Several council departments are situated in Rumsey. In Norman times, the life of Rumsey revolved around the abbey, founded in the 10th century and considered to be one of the finest examples of Norman architecture in Europe. It was the abbess who virtually ruled the town until Henry VIII dissolved the community and evicted the nuns in 1539. But the people of Rumsey raised the £100 that was needed to buy the church, and so the heritage was preserved for both residents and visitors today. One of the highlights of the year is the Rumsey Show, held in Broadlands Park, just outside Rumsey. Founded in 1842, the Rumsey Show is one of the biggest one-day shows in the south of England. Rumsey remains a traditional town, still watched over by Prime Minister Palmerston, who lived at nearby Broadlands and played a prominent part in the town's development. A contemporary of Palmerston was Florence Nightingale, founder of the nursing profession, who lived at Wellow and was buried there in 1910. Up to the mid-60s, Andover was a typical rural town with a population of 15,000. Traditional employment in farming being rapidly cut by mechanization. In the cities, particularly London, there were problems of another kind. Overcrowding, lack of space for industry to expand, and for housing, a rapidly increasing population. Faced with these problems, the London County Council, as it then was, looked to relocate industry and its workers in small overspill towns. And in 1961, an agreement was signed making Andover one of those towns. The idea was for the London Council to finance the purchase of land, for industry to relocate, and for house building. It was a scheme that radically changed the face of Andover and eventually meant that the town virtually doubled in size. Among the first to make the move was Twining's Tea, then confined to two cramped factory sites in the East End of London.
Whilst it was a tremendously dramatic move at the time, it was the best thing that ever happened to Twining's. We were bursting at the seams at our old factories in the East End, and we were able to bring 80 families with us and to set up this custom-built factory. And within a few years, because we were able to expand, we were opening a new plant in the north of England. We have since built onto this factory 5 times and onto the office block once, and we have fairly recently opened a new factory in North Carolina in the United States. None of that would have happened unless we'd come to Andover.
The overspill plan was an ambitious piece of social engineering, which certainly changed Andover and marked the resurgence of the area in terms of growth and prosperity. It meant a massive infusion of jobs and housing, which is being carefully continued today, with more businesses being attracted to the Test Valley and contributing to the wealth of the community as a whole. For instance, over 31% of all the rates paid to the council now come from industrial and commercial sources. In the mid-1970s, a major problem arose. A large number of the houses designed and built by the GLC were revealed as substandard, both in design and construction, and were rapidly becoming uninhabitable. Ultimately, there was only one course of action open to the Test Valley Council: to sue the GLC in order to obtain the money necessary for repairs. The action was successful, and the GLC agreed a settlement then worth £14 million to the borough, enabling the council to start on a massive repair programme. More than 2,000 houses, out of a total programme of some 2,700, have been virtually rebuilt. The latest estimated cost of this work is approaching £50 million. But by a combination of clever investment and planning by the Test Valley Borough Council, together with government housing subsidy, all the work would be covered by the original settlement. Housing and employment are just two of the major problems faced by any local authority. The fact that the Test Valley is in one of the more prosperous areas of the country, with an unemployment rate that would be the envy of most other regions, is no reason for complacency. Every year, hundreds of school leavers start out on the search for work. Take the John Hanson School in Andover, for example. This year, 230 left the fifth form. Though over a third will be looking to continue their education in places such as Cricklade College in Andover, it still means that from this one school alone, nearly 150 girls and boys will be looking for work, or a place on the youth training scheme. How do they react to people who criticise development?
I just don't know how they can say that, really, because, well, it's more jobs, more work. I mean, we're lucky, really. I mean, most of us would probably be able to get jobs quite easily.
We've got our towns and they're expanding, but there's still plenty of countryside around, and we've got things like Damebury Ring, and there's lots of fields and woods.
There's plenty of things to do. I mean, you can go out shooting and fishing, take the dog out, go for bike rides, things like that.
I like living in a town because then you've got all the shops, and I also like the country though because of the woods and things which I like. And I think in Test Valley there's a good balance between town and shops and countryside.
It's a difficult balance. The beauty of the countryside on one side and the need for jobs and housing on the other. It's a juggling act being played out all over the country. The necessity to advance and the desire to conserve. In the Test Valley, there are well-defined areas for industrial development, the largest of them around Andover, the Walworth and the Portway industrial estates. In the south of the valley, there are other industrial estates, such as Bud's Lane and Lusborough near Rumsey, and North Baddesley and Nursling. The attraction of new businesses to the area is one factor, but 2/3 of the units on the estates are taken by existing local businesses, enabling them to move out of more sensitive town locations and giving them the chance to expand, ensuring their survival and eventually creating more jobs. Typical of the firms being attracted to the expanding Portway East Industrial Estate is Alphamedic Keyboards, who are just moving into a 40,000 square foot unit, the first phase of development, on a 5-acre site, which will mean 150 new jobs. Alphamedic makes computer keyboards, used by all the leading computer manufacturers, as well as the stock exchange. Firms like Alphamedic are wooed by every area, but the company chose the Test Valley in view of the highly skilled personnel they either needed to recruit locally or persuade to transfer from their existing headquarters in Woking. But the biggest employer in the area is the TSB Trust Company, which started up in a couple of rooms in London 20 years ago. 5 years later, and the company was employing 40 people, and the time had to come to look outside London for the space to expand. Brian Brown, the managing director, and his staff looked at all the alternatives and chose Andover.
I think the attraction of the Test Valley is probably twofold. One, it's obviously an extremely pleasant, nice, very pretty place to live. I mean, there's some lovely countryside around. I don't think it's only that. I think you've also got the attraction that its communications are good, especially from a business point of view, forgetting people for a second. Communications with Heathrow, Southampton Airport, London are good, both rail, road, air, etc. Also, I think from the people's point of view, you've got some good shopping, good towns within the valley, but you've also got some extremely good shopping facilities that are within, what should we say, an hour's driving distance. I mean, you can get to Bath in an hour and have a very good day shopping, or Guildford or Oxford. So you've got those twin attractions. You've got good facilities in the valley, you've got a very, very attractive area, and you've got good communications.
Businesses such as the TSB are vital to the future of the Test Valley. They not only mean a variety of jobs, but they are the right kind of jobs. No one would suggest heavy industry should come to the valley. The Test Valley's policy of encouraging new industry and employment has already paid off. Just one of the signs of that policy is the new £10 million scheme to revitalise and expand the Chantry Way shopping centre in Andover. The centre will be completed and fully operational by Easter 1990. Jerry Blythe is the Chief Executive of the Test Valley Borough Council.
In a recent study, Andover was singled out as being the 12th most prosperous town in the country. And of course, as a result of this prosperity, there is a tremendous amount of pressure for growth, both in terms of building new houses, building new factories, right the way throughout the whole of Test Valley. The council's policy at the moment is to try and restrain growth in the southern part of the area, centred on Romsey, and to control growth in Andover, so that we keep everything as far as possible in balance, so that housing keeps pace with industry and that the social facilities are provided at the same time. This, as I say, is our major task.
It all comes down to maintaining that balance. A balance that means our children can stay in the valley and find work here if they choose. At the same time, causes the least possible harm to what we have already got, which must be one of the most beautiful pieces of countryside in England. As for myself, it's time I went to catch my supper. Nothing like a fresh trout.